Hello there, it's Silver. This is Star Vortex. So this just released into early access, and it's an action RPG, a top-down space shooter action RPG that is clearly inspired by stuff like Diablo, but also probably, I'm gonna guess, inspired by other games similar in the genre like Drox Operative or Star Valor. But either way, it has launched into early access with quite a bit of content to start with, which is always a good idea with action RPGs because they're pretty much live or die on the amount of content and the variety of content they have accessible. So starting out with a good amount of it is generally a good choice. So when it comes to like top-down space shooter RPGs, any game that wants to go into that kind of genre or subgenre, I guess, has some shoes to fill because there are several really good long-time games in this genre, and you're immediately going to be compared to those whether you're trying to be compared to them or not. You know, going all the way back to stuff like Escape Velocity Nova or Space Pirates and Zombies, you've got plenty of long-lasting favorites in the genre. So I think what you've got to kind of do to stand out is to have some good elements like solid polish, a cool visual aspect, maybe some fun game mechanics. You know, you just got to do some things to stand out a bit in the genre, I think, because of that inevitable comparison that people are going to be doing. And I would say that I think this game does that pretty well, especially in regards to its ship construction, but we'll get to that in a minute. So first off, how the game looks and sounds. It looks really good, in my opinion, especially for an early access release that is likely going to have some visual changes before the end. It just looks great. It's an extremely colorful game, but it's interesting that its color palette is a lot of kind of saturated but dark colors that gives it this interesting look. You'll notice that space itself is very colorful in this game. You're pretty much never going to jump into a system that's just pure blackness with no other features. Instead, in even the darkest of areas, you're probably going to find that there's like a big dark green star in the background or something like that to catch your eye. Warp gates all glow like a dark purple, which I very much enjoy. Pretty much all loot in the game has a sort of a bright glow to it, from the rarity glows of various pieces of gear to the like golden glow of money and things like that. You'll also be coming across various enemy factions, and there's a lot of differences when it comes to fighting each faction mechanically, but also you'll notice that each faction has its own color scheme. All of the faction's ships will be a specific set of colors so that you can identify them immediately. These are often also used to sort of contrast with the backgrounds. I've noticed that a lot of the faction-specific space backgrounds have complementary colors to the colors of the enemy ships that are going to be in that area. Also important in any game like this is all the projectiles and weaponry and stuff, because you're looking at that a lot during combat and you want it to look cool. That's just how space games work. You want all your lasers to look sweet. And they do look really good in this game. And they're also relevant in terms of what color they are, because not only will you see some really cool looking lasers and energy bolt weapons and projectiles and stuff like that, but also they all have a specific color to them, and this tells you what type of damage they do. So if you see a purple laser or a purple energy bolt or like a purple explosive missile or something like that, then you can know that that is going to be doing caustic damage, because caustic damage in this game is color-coded purple. I think it's a really good idea to give the player a specific cue to know what damage they're getting hit by immediately, because you do have separate resistances for each damage type. So it's important to use gear that gives you certain resistances depending on what you're fighting, so you need to know whenever you jump into a new place what kind of damage the enemy is throwing at you predominantly. So the fact that they're color-coded like this is very helpful. I also really appreciate the ship aesthetics in this game. I think the ships all look really cool, both yours and the enemy. And when it comes to building your own ship, you have a wide variety of different parts to choose from, each with their own different aesthetics. And in fact, there are even other factions' aesthetics you can get a hold of eventually later on that allow you to change what types of parts you're going to use to construct your ship. And you can mix and match them to create whatever you want. So I do really like the way that the ship parts look. And you can even use enemy ships as like inspiration for making your own if you wish, because they are using similar parts. And you get a quite detailed view of them on the screens that you can select before you jump into a new area. You get to see like a preview of what all is there waiting for you to blow you up. So the really cool looking ship part aesthetic is definitely a plus for me. I think that Overall, the ship parts that you can use kind of look like a combination of metal and plastic in terms of their overall appearance, but like a space-age plastic, like a fancy one, so that all of the parts have kind of a shiny, very colorful look to them that is quite saturated and nice, and they also tend to fit together really well. I think it's just because all of the different factions of parts that you can access have kind of similar aesthetics to the point where it's not difficult at all to find parts that belong together. Like pretty much all of the parts belong together so that you can make really cool looking ships very easily. If you like to customize ships and make them look really specific ways, then you're going to really love the ship customization in this game because you've got a lot of options. In terms of how the game sounds, the first thing to notice is, of course, all the sound effects, since you're going to be hearing lots and lots of those, and they are useful sound effects, by which I mean a lot of weapons make specific sounds, so you can kind of know that they have been fired even if you can't see them or they're off screen or something. You can kind of hear them instead. So a lot of the sound design in terms of combat seems to be focused on clarity and alerting the player to what enemies around them are doing. But of course, all of your weaponry does have a sound as well, and it sounds good. It sounds like what you would expect for a sort of pew-pew laser-based action RPG to sound in terms of its combat scape. It's very energy-based and stuff, which is, I mean, a cool sound for something super sci-fi like this. But the way the music works is a little bit different because the music in this game is really synth forward. There's a lot of like droning ambient synth sounds happening. Whenever enemies spawn into an area, then it sort of picks up a bit and you get more of a pulse, an electronic pulse to the music that gives it sort of an upbeat vibe, but it's still got a lot of that same kind of synth drone in the background that is always there pretty much all the time, it seems like, and provides an interesting sort of backdrop to the more upbeat music in front of it. And then when bosses spawn in, you get an even more action-y kind of music going on with a lot of percussion and stuff happening, so that the overall soundscape is pretty busy during boss fights. But I've also noticed that at default volume settings, the music never drowns out the sound effects. The sound effects are always kind of sharp, so they're audible over the music like at all times. I also noticed that the soundscape changes a little bit when you're in a safe area. So when you're in one of the nodes that has a trader in it, or if you're back at home, you have a home base area where you can go to modify your ship and mess with your skill points and all that stuff. And in these areas, the droning synth part is a lot more slowed down and kind of calm sounding. So I definitely like the overall soundscape of the game. I think it's effective for the type of, heavy sci-fi action RPG that it is. But then we've got the gameplay, and there's quite a bit here to talk about. So the first most obvious thing is you start with a ship, and the ship will have a basic complement of weapon slots and some really basic gear like a shield and like some sort of primary weapon. And then you will go on your way. And you have this big map full of nodes that represents the sector that you're in. And each node will have some sort of encounter in it, from like an enemy skirmish to a defense mission to some sort of like capture mission. There are various different ones that you can come across. And as you go farther to the right on this map, the levels of the enemies get higher and higher, and everything gets more and more difficult. Now, this is an ARPG, so you are, of course, encouraged to find as much loot as possible, and you will be getting a lot of it. There's a lot of color-coded rarities and stuff, so there's plenty of loot for you to find, all sorts of different weapon types for different slots that all do different kinds of damage, plenty of defensive and utility items as well that do various different things, so you have quite a lot of possible options that you'll be finding as you go through the areas. You do have a limited amount of inventory space. It's based on slots, not like weight or anything, and whenever you want, you can jump back to a discovered trader or the home base area to sell your stuff and free up more space and get a bunch of money. And of course, these areas also allow you to buy things. The basic trader at your home base only has like some basic stuff available, but they do have a lot of healing items and stuff as like a reliable supply, so that's nice to have. But the other traders that you'll find floating around space, they tend to have more exotic stuff. They have a smaller selection, but more fancy selection. There is a ship class system that works in kind of an interesting way. So you'll start out with the lowest class of ship, the smallest, so it can't be that large. This means there's a bunch of rings that show you the different ship classes in the ship builder, and each of these rings represents like a bigger and bigger class of ships. So you have to stay within those rings' boundaries in order to have a certain class of ship, whatever you have unlocked. And basically, like every 15 levels or so, you will unlock a larger class size. And if you choose to build a ship that is bigger in size that goes past the previous ring that you were normally limited to, then you will get some extra benefits for it, like some extra slot types in their new ship, as well as a larger default hull size or hull HP. But it'll also be a bigger ship physically, which means it's got a bigger hitbox. Also, every 10 levels, you will get one extra hardpoint type, one weapon point, basically. So that whenever you are building a ship, you have a specific number of types of like mounting points you can fit on that ship. They can be any combination of points you want, but you have to stay within a specific number. So every 10 levels, this number expands by one. This is important because as you get gear, you'll see the gear has sort of a symbol in the upper left of its icon. These like colored shaped symbols, like the sort of triangular one, which means it's a primary weapon and needs a primary weapon slot to be equipped, or secondary weapons are like a red square and things like that. So this is just a way to show you what kinds of slots you need on your ship in order to equip all the things that you want. So this is a big reason to look forward to those big every 10 thresholds so that you can get some new types of hardpoints and equip more fancy stuff. And yes, you can have multiple types of the same point to equip multiple types of weaponry and things like that in the slots. In fact, I think there might be a limit of 5 of each slot type, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So while you're in a sector, you'll be given some missions, and these missions usually involve exploring to specific far-off points on the map and finding like a boss or something there and defeating it. But of course, you can't just rush to these nodes, generally speaking, because if you try to follow the story in a straight line and not do any side content at all, then you will find yourself in like a level 10 area at level 5, and you'll get just destroyed by everything. So you do need to also wander around and do some side stuff in order to keep up with your level. Whenever you level up, you'll gain a point, and there are 3 different skill trees that you can put this point into. There's quite a variety of different things, different skills that you can purchase with these points, which I do like. There tends to be about 3 to 5 for every row, and of course when you put a certain number of points in any one of them, then the next rows will unlock farther down the screen. And then eventually, the very final row of each of the trees, it only has 1 skill, and it's an extra weapon point. So you can gain new points without doing the whole every 10 levels thing by getting to the bottom of each tree, which is pretty valuable. You have your more basic stuff like, 4% more armor or 5% more shield per point, but you've also got some weapon enhancements. Each tree has its own focus on different kinds of weapons. Like the red tree will have projectile weapons, for instance, and then the blue tree will have like laser weapons and laser bolt firing weapons. Helpfully, above any given weapon's icon, it will tell you what type of weapon it is, so that you always know which of these nodes you can purchase will actually benefit it. So there's never any question as to which weapons benefit from which skills. It's always very obvious, which I definitely appreciate. But you've also got some other nodes that involve unlocking new types of gear. So when you first start out, you'll be finding lots of gear that you can't use. Some of it will be because it's too high of a level. Some of it will be because you need a weapon slot that you don't currently have unlocked. And some of them will be because they are a type of gear that you just can't use yet. Like, say, homing missile weapons. Those require a certain point to be put into the red skill tree to unlock. So you'll find lots of homing missile launchers of different kinds, but you can't actually equip them even if you have the open weapon slot until you purchase that node on the skill tree that unlocks them. Same for like cone weapons like scatter guns and things, as well as bolt weapons like chain lightning guns and things. So there's quite a bit to unlock in the tree, and this means that any one point you can put in the skill tree is often a relatively powerful point because there's a lot of stuff to unlock. So you generally do feel more powerful after a couple of levels. So after you get yourself equipped, you will start striking out into this sector, this map. And each node has to be connected to a new node for you to travel to it. But once you've connected it, you can travel between any of them at any distance. So you have to go one at a time if you haven't been there before, but once you have, you can teleport all the way back to your home base and then all the way back to where you just were in just 2 jumps. Certain areas of the map have sort of a colored glow around the nodes, and this means that those areas are owned by a specific faction that you'll encounter exclusively when you go there. And there will also be some elite missions, which spawn special faction-specific elite enemies that are quite difficult and very powerful, but give you good rewards to beat them. And then eventually, once you go far enough, you will find some bosses. and boss fights in this game work kind of like you would expect. They're just really big screen-filling bosses with tons of weapons that fire huge curtains of bullets at you that you got to dodge, and loads of missiles and lasers and stuff, and then you sort of batter them down slowly. And I found that generally speaking, the bosses don't have like a tremendous amount of health. It doesn't take absolutely forever to take them down, but they are very powerful, so you got to be careful. Once you take care of a mission, you can go to the missions menu in the pause screen and complete the mission. You got to make sure to do this for everyone you complete. And when you do this, it'll give you a bulk sum of XP, like a bunch of XP, and a whole bunch of money as well at the same time. These are very helpful, especially once you get past like level 15 or so, when it starts to take quite a long time to level up per level. So having these big sums to give you a big burst of experience is necessary. And then eventually, once you explore enough areas, you will get these core thingies that you can plop in the gate back home, and this will allow you to eventually go to an entirely new sector. So it will generate a whole new map with new objectives for you. And in the current early access version, there are 3 total sectors to run through. That's quite a bit. There's a lot of points for each one. There's like 150 or so for each one, so that's definitely a lot of stuff to do. I also noticed a really interesting feature. Sometimes, very rarely, when you complete an area, a whole bunch of new ships will jump in that are called Species 11, and they have a completely different, very organic ship look to them than any other faction in the game, and they also have some really nasty weapons that they can use against you, and they are more difficult on average than other enemies of that same level. But sometimes when you beat them, you can get some really neat rewards, including some of their weapons and stuff that you couldn't get otherwise, and you'll also get this seed thing sometimes, which allows you to go to a warp point and plop the seed into it, which will then corrupt that warp point and allow you to spawn even more of these Species 11 people and fight them for better rewards. The ship builder in this game is definitely a big selling point for it, because it's a very robust ship builder. You've got this cool system where you have a whole list of different modules and things at the bottom of the screen, and you can just drag and drop them onto the middle however you want to create whatever ship shape you want to create. There are certain requirements, like it has to be a certain size and it has to have a certain number of hard points and stuff on it, so you do have to fit within certain guidelines, but for the most part those guidelines are very basic and they do not determine what shape or size it has to be specifically, so you have a lot of freedom when it comes to what to actually build. Every single part seems to have 4 different aesthetic variants. They're all the same, they all perform the same, but they look quite different from each other depending on which factions you fought in the world before. And also I believe there are other factions entirely of wholly new parts that you can find as you progress. I really enjoy the ship builder in this game. It's very easy to use, but it's also quite powerful, which is a rare combination. Oftentimes, ship builders that give you a lot of options are also very complex to learn how to use. But this one is absolutely not. It's very easy to get to terms with, but it still allows for a lot of creativity in your own designs. You can choose to save and load any designs that you have made so far, which is nice. And also there are a bunch of templates of the different ship classes that you can load in terms of the game itself, like they're already within the game made by the developer. So you can have some basic templates to work from. Either you can load these and then modify them to be whatever you want, or you can just load them and use them as they are if you wish as well. You can also share ship designs from other players, but they have to give you a specific code that it generates for them. I think it would be much cooler to have this game have some workshop access, like some Steam Workshop support, so that you could upload and download your own ship designs there and everyone could share them more easily. I think that'd be very cool. As it currently stands, I think the overall state of the early access that it has launched into so far is a really good one. There's a very decent amount of content here, and there's also quite a significant amount of polish on the content that's already available. I haven't really experienced any bugs or major hiccups along the way personally, so I can't, of course, talk about what others have experienced, but for me, I think that the game is very stable and very polished so far. I really appreciate what they're going for. I think that the space action RPG genre is kind of dense right now, so trying to break into it is going to be a challenging thing, but I think that this game does more than enough unique and interesting that makes it stand out. The developer, a solo dev by the way, I think, has been taking all sorts of feedback and stuff from Steam forums and their Discord and all those other sources, and have been, just cataloging things and making small updates and stuff. So it's clear they have a very serious outlook for what they want this game to be, and they definitely want to add a lot to it and polish it up and things so that everyone enjoys it. And I think that's a very cool thing. I expect that I'll be revisiting this game in the future once it builds up some more updates. So I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Star Vortex if you wish to check it out yourselves. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.